how do you take dominion?
Yeah.
And really, it boils down to that. How do you responsibly use the opportunities that the Lord has given you to create a flourishing environment for the people around you? That's right.
Yeah. All right, welcome to the Sword, the Bow, and the Axe. We are here for, I guess we're calling it Season 2.
Yes.
And we are outside
We're back.
in Ore City, Texas. Outside of Ore City, Texas. We're truly in the kind of middle of nowhere, East Texas right now. Around a table on the back patio, drinking coffee.
What are these giant things sticking out of the
Yeah,
ground?
gigantic. What do you think? 50-foot pine trees? 60-foot? How
From
tall do you
West
think
Texas,
these
we
things
don't know
are?
what these are.
They're
Yeah.
tall.
We
They're
didn't
tall,
see these.
tall pine trees, and I'm here in person, in the flesh,
In the flesh.
with the two best friends, three friends united,
Ooh. The dwarf.
the dwarf, the elf, and the man. We're reunited. So you guys, Stephen and Nathan, y'all give a little intro to our people.
Yeah, so y'all came out to visit me. So we're out in the woods in East Texas, which maybe if most of our listeners are still in Abilene, then we'd have to describe what it is that we're looking at around us, which is trees and water. And no, it doesn't always come in from the sky. Some of it exists on the ground year long. No, but it's a joy to be able to do this in person. So for those of you who don't know, I pastor out in this area. So these brothers came to see me, and we thought it'd be a good time to kick off Season 2 while we're here.
Yeah, shout out to McCravy's Senior, the Craig and Sherry just hosting us out here. This is
Greg,
sorry, not Craig.
not Craig. Greg.
I need to go apologize. I called him Craig. He didn't correct me.
He probably didn't hear you well.
He probably did. But Greg and Sherry being awesome hosts.
Yeah.
Giving us just free reign out here to hike around and fish and just do it. Let our kids go crazy. So huge blessing. And we're back. We're in the flesh, embodied.
This is actually our first one that this is the first time we've been together since we started recording a podcast.
That's right.
That's true.
It's our first live one all together, which is
Like,
super sad.
Yeah.
But it is what
So
it is.
podcast or not, this is the first time us three have been together since we started recording podcasts.
So
Like,
that's why
6
the
months.
audio's bad. If the audio's bad compared to what it is,
Yeah,
typically, it's 'cause we're enjoying it
We are.
instead of y'all.
Yeah, we're legitimately on the back patio
That's right.
outside. It's windy. It may rain in the middle of this.
But it's glorious.
But we're out in the Lord's creation. So, so this season we're going to be talking about. Last season, we talked about discipleship. We're going to be talking about dominion, what it looks like to take dominion. And so, speaking about creation, speaking about dominion, I'm just going to start in Genesis, and then this episode is going to be a little less structured than what our other ones are. We're just going to kind of see where it goes. Hopefully, we stay on topic. We may not. The Lord will use it however He wants. So Genesis 1:26 says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.' So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" So God gives us a job, several tasks to do in the garden. And one of them is to have dominion over His creation.
I was going to say, you just had dominion over this podcast, but you just let's go right into
Let's
it.
go right into
So
it.
you're practicing what you preach.
There you
This
go.
is amazing.
So, what does it mean? What does it mean to you guys to when you hear what some people call the cultural mandate? What does it mean for you to have dominion, just in general, everyday life, in your job, whatever that looks like? What does it mean when you hear have dominion?
Well,
Esteban.
maybe I'm going to geek out here a little bit, but I've been teaching sixth graders Latin, and by teaching I mean I've been working through the workbook with them and learning Latin with them. And so Latin, I think the root word for dominion has some Latin context because the word domus is house, and where we get that from that word we get derivatives like domicile, domesticity, and I think dominion falls in there, where you take control or you rule over a house, right? Where you have a section or a plot or you have clearly defined boundaries that you've been asked to rule over, and so dominion and rule kind of go hand in hand. Reign, and the thing I like about Genesis is that we were created in God's likeness, and immediately after, God gives us a job. And the word there is dominion, to reign, to rule, to have headship, because that's what God has, right? It's like that's what God has over his creation. He rules, he reigns, he is Lord, and he gives us that authority through him, because we're created in his likeness, to do the things that he does on purpose. I think that's the whole thing, is purposeful. So it's not, and it's kind, and when done in a godly way, dominion is a very good thing. It's a blessing. I think it's 2 Samuel, where the I got to find the verse now that I'm thinking about it. The kindly rule, or the wise rule of a king is like the dew on grass in the morning, the fresh dew on grass. It's the reviving nature to a land when a king rules. Yeah, look that up for me, Nate. When a king rules well, when he has dominion well. So in my mind, I think, when I look at that word and when I think about that job description, I think, how am I doing ruling well? And we can talk more, but I think it starts with yourself, and then it concentric rings out like most things in our life. Start with you. Start with what the Lord's asked you to do. Get your heart right. Unite yourself to Christ. Have dominion over the flesh that's that's sinful through the uniting power of Christ and the Spirit. And then concentric ring that out to the spheres God has given you and placed you in. You don't have to do everything, and you're not called to rule over everything. You're called to rule over what God has given you as a boundary, and to extend that rule as far as God wants you to. So, to me, that's what it means. It's to rule. It's to keep a house. It's to put things in order. It's to act like God in the spheres He's placed me in. That's what I strive to do anyway. Although imperfectly.
Yeah, I think you were quoting maybe Proverbs 12:19.
Okay.
King's wrath is like the growling of a lion, but his favor is like the dew on the grass.
Okay. I can get behind that one.
Maybe quoted somewhere else, but that's where I found it first.
Oh, here it is. I just turned to it. 2 Samuel 23. When one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like the morning light, like the sun shining forth on a cloudless morning, like rain that makes grass to sprout from the earth. So I just think...
Yeah, so his domain's a blessing.
That's the last
How did
word.
you just turn to that?
Dude, I just opened it up. I was like, it's in Samuel somewhere. And look, I have margin notes that say, rule well, good authority, godly authority, pray for it.
You got a crease in your binding
That
or in
was-
your Bible.
That was
It just
impressive.
falls over.
That was the Lord.
That's
providential.
Yeah, there you go.
That was impressive.
Yeah, so I think that's where I'd go with that.
Yeah, especially whenever you compare that idea to just the air that we breathe in Western naturalistic culture, where humanity is a blight on the world. There's all these doomsday theories about the overpopulation of the earth. We need less humans, not more. And just how opposite that is from a Christian worldview. We need more humans who are taking more dominion in such a way that it is a blessing to the people and the creation around us. So I think that's what comes first to my mind when you have this conversation about dominion. But I think what comes second to my mind, but I think should come more to my mind, we were having conversations about Psalm 8 last night, and thinking about how Psalm 8, what is man that you are mindful of him? You have made him a little lower than the angels. But in that whole psalm, he keeps talking, the psalmist is talking about how grand and glorious the heavens and the heavenly beings are. So there's these spiritual beings that are so glorious that man marvels at them. And then David is then just struck by how much purpose and intention God has given to man. And so one of the things that I think is implied in the dominion mandate is that we, in our visible manifestations of our dominion, we demonstrate the power of the unseen God. So there's a way in which they're the invisible realities that are tied to our visible dominion taking. As we like 2 Samuel is talking about, are a blessing to the people and the creation around us, well, then it speaks a testimony to the unseen realities as well, that ultimately delivers all of its glory to God. So I don't know, I've just that's been something that I've been thinking a lot lately. Like, how does our physical activity and motion in this world reflect and then interact with the immaterial and invisible realities of the world? And I think Psalm 8 just hits on that well. So you go back to God saying, "Let us make man in our image." So there's the idea of man imaging the invisible God, and then sharing in his rule in space and time, but also as a means by which we are instruments in his hands. So it's his dominion taking, but through us as his vice regents, as his governors on his behalf. So just, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm trying to say with this, more than just that interaction. Our dominion taking doesn't just mean, go have a plot of land and farm it, or, go start a business and build it. But that all of these have interactions with revealing the invisible realities of God and then his creation as well.
I think one thing Stephen said that I think is important is to...
Because what I said wasn't important?
It is important. It's
okay.
super important.
Just less.
But just less important than what Stephen said. Okay.
Sure.
It's
It's because he's older. I just been thinking about it the whole time you're talking, so I need to get it out of my head. So he said what we mean by dominion, and then he said something about like what we don't mean by dominion. So what we want to, in 2025, the word dominion, I think, can be used or weaponized against like us as patriarchal Christian men who want to have dominion over our household in a way that's honoring to the Lord, not in a way that's like this domineering dictatorship. We want a dominion where our wives are flourishing because we're taking control of what the Lord's given us. We want our kids to flourish because we are leading them in the ways of righteousness. Deuteronomy 6, waking up and teaching them and instructing them by the way. And so just what we don't mean by dominion is to somehow domineer over our wives and kids and rule over them in a way that's unrighteous or unjust. Like we read about different kings in the Bible, even over Israel, who they had bad dominion. They had unrighteous dominion. And what happened? Israel did not flourish. They were not prospering.
And God judged them.
Yeah, and exactly, God judged them. But whenever they had the king who was righteous, like a David or like Josiah, then Israel was flourishing and God was pleased. And so we want to be those types of, to use that language, we want to be those types of kings in our house who have dominion, do it well, so that those under our care, those in our dominion, flourish and prosper. And then the Lord gets the glory from that. So I don't know if y'all have anything to add to that. I just was thinking, this day and age, I feel like that word is can be used against guys like us who say, hey, we want to have dominion, and someone may take that and go, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think when people hear it, they think control, they think power, they think selfish ambition. That's what they hear whenever they hear something like dominion or authority. But what we mean is something more along the lines of responsibility. right? And a mindfulness, not a selflessness, not a mindfulness for self, but a care for the people in particular under your care. So you've been given responsibility to cause others to flourish, right? I think that's ultimately what we mean by dominion. Rightly taking the responsibilities that the Lord has given you, whether it's very small, right? So I don't want to hear someone to hear, well, in order to take dominion, I think there's an assumption, maybe this is just in my own mind, I think there's an assumption that whenever I hear that idea of dominion, I think more along the lines of like having physical space and then taming that physical space. So like having a plot of land,
Yeah, I mean,
and
I think
cultivating that. But I'm also thinking like, so what is the person who lives in a 1-bedroom apartment?
Mhm.
Like, how are they taking dominion
Yeah.
whenever you don't have really any access to change any of the physical realities in your life at that point? So how do you take dominion?
Yeah.
And really, it boils down to that. How do you responsibly use the opportunities that the Lord has given you to create a flourishing environment for the people around you? That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, because every authority is not to terminate in itself. It's always to spread to those who are under that authority, and it's always to be a blessing. You're blessed to be a blessing. You're given much so that you will be responsible for much. Too much is given, much is required. You'll be held in higher account. You'll be held to a higher standard, those who lead and have authority or have any type of influence, and God raises up for those purposes, but he opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And so your rule is always in humble submission to God as ruler above all things, and in and under his design. So you mirror him, and but how closely are you following his example? And that's why Christ is our ultimate example, the one who came as the man who fulfills that Psalm 8 passage. He fulfills that, being that last Adam, the one who has been given all authority. In Matthew 28, all authority has been given to Christ. And he gives that authority over to us to go be his disciples, his handprint, his feet and hands in the world. And we are to mirror God in that pursuit and do it in a really humble, meek way, but also in a very focused and missional, directional way. We're not to be tossed around. We're to be firm, steadfast, knowing the work that we're doing is the work of God, and it's in a good conscience, and we're doing what we need to do. So
Yeah, I think it's good. And going back to the opening, Genesis 1, like God says, "Hey, I'm gonna impart my image upon you, and then you're gonna have dominion, like I have dominion. I created all these things, and now I'm giving that to you." Obviously, Genesis 3 happens, and so that gets broken. But in Christ, we are restoring that broken image, and so as we grow in the Lord, I feel like for my own life, as I've grown in the Lord, there's been more responsibility that has been afforded to me in just various capacities. And so, we can read Genesis 1 and go, well, the Lord didn't give me a whole garden that I had to tend and work and keep and have dominion over. But if you are the guy who is like, man, no one wants to give me any kind of responsibility, nobody wants to give me dominion, maybe it's because you're not looking for it, or maybe it's because you are the guy in the 1-bedroom apartment, and you're single, and you're just trying to figure out what to do with life. How do you take dominion over that 1-bedroom apartment, or how do you take dominion over your life? And I think the first thing to do if you're that guy, or if you know that guy, just seek the Lord. And because again, going back to the kings of Israel, the ones who ruled well and had dominion well were the ones who sought after the Lord. David was the man after God's own heart, and even juxtaposing him to Saul, Saul was like the nations. He was not seeking after God. He was seeking after his own self-interest. And yeah, the kingdom may have prospered for a small time, but ultimately it was in disarray because of his selfish rule. So if you're the guy who you don't know how to take dominion, or you're just going, well, yeah, I hear you guys talking about that, but how do I do that? And if you pursue the Lord in His kindness, there will be blessing like Abraham, right? It's not prosperity gospel, but you will be blessed so that you can go and bless others, and in that blessing others, you'll be taking dominion over whatever that sphere is. You know, maybe it's work, maybe it's family members, or whatever it may be. So.
And so maybe we can synthesize this down and boil it down for people, get it real practical. What does it look like to take dominion as a young man? So like some of our listeners who be young men who are like, okay, I hear you, but I don't have a wife, I don't have kids, I'm working, HEB, and I'm going to school part-time. Like, how do I have dominion? And I think to anyone who wants to lead has to first lead himself. Blake says this a lot, and I love it. Like, if you want to be a good leader, if you want to be someone who has righteous rule in your life, or someone who's on that path to take dominion in a good way, well, know what it means to rule yourself. Know what it means to have mastery over your desires. Know what it means to be united to the one who, to Christ, who has authority over all things, whose righteous rule is one we follow. And then how do you live in that? And so maybe we can talk about that. Maybe we can just get real practical that, how are you using your minutes? Like Blake, oh man, it's one of the more impactful things that I've had to do since being on staff at church and just learning how to have mastery over my time is huge. So like, you as a man, your time is your most valuable asset, your most valuable commodity, because you won't get it back, and you can leverage it for the kingdom or against it, or for good things, or and it can easily be stripped away in this day and age. Time wasters abound. And so you think, how can you have dominion over your life? Well, I think for the young man, it's like, dude, what are you doing with your minutes? Like, manage your time well, budget your time well, and God will be more pleased, and you'll have more margin for the things that you may think, I just have no time for that. Gosh, we hear that all the time. You're like, I don't have time for that. I'm like, dude, what do you have no wife, no kids, you have one job? And I'm like, you go to school, what do you mean you don't have time for that? It's like, it's all relative.
I have 5 kids and I have time for that.
You're like, but again, it's about growing as a man to manage your time and increase your margin by doing things really well. And that's a skill, but it's also something that if you can learn young, you can actually set yourself up for a lot of success, and just being able to follow the Lord fully earlier, right? Because you're not just out there just wasting time and feel like, oh, I'm just crunched. I don't have a lot of margin to maybe do what I think the Lord's asking me to do. And so even just small things like that can please the Lord. He's given you this time. He's given you this breath. Steward it well. Have dominion. And pursue the Lord.
I think a book that's worth reading that would be described as kind of in that vein would be Thoughts for Young Men.
Ooh, yeah.
By J.C. Ryle.
Fantastic.
And one of his major points in the book is that young men they don't give regard for what they'll be like when they're old men.
Yeah.
And so they don't pay attention to their habits. They don't pay attention to their time. And so what would it look like if a young man took dominion over his habits and his time, and what kind of fruit would that breed over time? And I think you can actually stretch that out. I think it does get harder as you get older, but whatever stage in life you are in, understand that the habits and the seeds that you're sowing now, you will reap in a future stage in your life. So I would commend it to any man in particular, not just young men, but understanding that you are young compared to your next stage of life. So wherever you are, pick up that book and read it. And I think it'll cast a really helpful vision
Super short.
for developing yourself into the next vision. I'm taking a college student through it right now, and talking through some of those things. That's been remarkably helpful. When I think about time, and the potential for time wasters, I think about like dieting. So it's possible to maybe you eat 3 healthy meals a day, but you're not seeing much progress. But then whenever you look a little closer, you see, well, I'm getting the grilled chicken nuggets at Chick-fil-A, but then I'm dousing them in Chick-fil-A sauce. I'm eating a salad and some protein, but then I'm snacking on some candy right before I go to bed. And so there's these little things, these little gaps that actually could totally just derail what you're trying to do. So it is good and helpful to pay attention to the small things. So you may think, well, I've got big chunks of my day where I'm focused, I'm taking care of what I need to take care of. But then whenever you start to look at those small things and the edges, and 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, an hour here, and then you start adding that time up, it becomes a pretty substantial block of time without you even realizing it. Because it wasn't maybe all pieced together in one whole, you didn't see it. But then whenever you kind of examine your time, those things become a little more clear.
Yeah.
So it could be that you feel like, oh, I'm doing really well in taking dominion in these areas, but I don't feel like I'm making overall progress. Well, it may be because you've got these diet killers kind of on the fringes that you really don't think have any impact. But when you piece them together, it's a pretty substantial piece of what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
I think the screen time app on the Apple products or
You want to be
whatever
convicted.
Android has,
Yeah.
if you think you're killing it, man, just kind of browse there and see what apps you open up and how much time did you spend in that week.
Yeah.
That's maybe you can set some goals with that metric. It's like lower this number.
Yeah.
So you want to lower your A1C or you want to lower your Facebook intake.
So I have this just made me think of this. If you've read The Hobbit, in I think it's chapter 7 is Riddles in the Dark, and if you haven't read The Hobbit, then you need to get out, you need to go read it, and then come back and listen to this. But I'm pretty sure it's chapter 7, Riddles in the Dark. Gollum and Bilbo are going back and forth because Gollum basically wants to eat Bilbo, and so they go back and forth. And Gollum has this riddle. Gollum has this riddle, and it goes like this. It says, "This thing all things devours, birds, beast, trees, and flowers. Gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to meal. Slays kings, ruins towns, and beats high mountain down." So I just think of that as like the time wasters. If you're not careful,
You got to tell them what the answer to the riddle is.
it's time.
Okay.
It's time.
All right. Yeah.
So the answer to the riddle is time. Yeah. Gollum gets super frustrated, and then Bilbo's like, "What's I got in my pocket?" And he gives him 3 answers. It's not really a riddle, but so it just is a good picture of if we just sit by passively and idly by, time is going to grind on us, and it's undefeated in that aspect. It grinds mountains down, it slays kings, it ruins towns. If you've ever seen a house that's in America that's more than like 50 years old, what starts happening to it? Over time, it just starts deteriorating and degrading. If you don't upkeep, you don't change out the siding, and you don't, change out the fixtures and all those kinds of things. So another good resource. So go read Thoughts for Young Men. Another good book to have dominion over your time would be a book called Living Forward. I don't know if the men who wrote it are believers or not, but I want to say it's Michael Hyatt, and last name is Harkavy. Anyway, Living Forward, they have resources for free, and it just basically is a roadmap for how to spend your time well. And so you really reverse engineer your life with this book. You write out a eulogy, and then you write out, what are the important things in my life?
Yeah.
And so anytime you go to make a decision, and if you're married, you do this with you do it on your own, and then you share this with your wife, right? Because she's your helper. The Lord gave her to you as a helper. Submission means that there must be a mission in order so you can submit to it. And so you share this with your wife, and when you go to make maybe tough decisions, maybe easy decisions, that document makes it really easy to say yes or no to things. hey, is this going to help fuel our mission? Is this going to help get us to our end goal while we're here on this earth, or is it not? And if it doesn't, it's like, well, maybe we don't need to do that. It's not an absolute thing, but it's been helpful for us to go, well, we're just, it's okay. We're not going to go to the third cousin's birthday in wherever, because we would rather go to, the biblical counseling conference. So you just start making those types of decisions based on that. You reverse engineer your life based on that document. And it helps you not waste time. It helps you take dominion over your calendar and over what you're doing. So,
Yeah, as we're thinking through this, end of Revelation comes to mind where the kings of the earth come and they present their treasures before the Lord. So you have this idea of these two bookmarks of the biblical story: the creation of man as a king and a queen in a garden, and then at the end of the story, this world is covered with kings and queens. And what do? They bring their treasures to the Lord. They bring them before Him and present them before Him. And so, to use the language that Alex just used of reverse engineering your life, a way to ask that question is, at the end of your life, what would you want to bring to the Lord? What would you want to present before Him as a gift of worship to Him? And kind of saying that as the sum total of your life. So what is it that I would want my life to look like in such a way that I would, with joy and a clear conscience, be able to present this before the Lord, understanding that it's all by His grace, understanding that not a bit of it's possible without the gospel. This isn't pull up yourself by your bootstraps. Depending on where you are in your life, you may be pretty limited in the physical things that you can accomplish, but just recognizing, okay, this is my area of responsibility. These are the opportunities that the Lord has given me. How can I take dominion in such a way that I would present them before Him by His grace and do so with a clear conscience and with great joy to say, Lord, you gave me this much. I use these talents to produce this much because I love you and because I want these things to be used in honor of you. I think that just matches really well with the biblical story. So that phrase, reverse engineer your life, not just like, what would they say at your eulogy, but like, what life would you present before the Lord on the last day?
Right. That's so good. My seventh graders, ninth grade, all my science classes, so 7th, 8th, and 9th. At ACA, we have a catechism we start every morning with, or every class period. And I ask them, gentlemen, who are you? And they all say, I am a king, for I rule myself. And I say, ladies, who are you? And they say, I am a queen, for I rule myself. And I said, what does it mean to rule yourself? And they say, I am not my own. They say, I am free to do good. I am not the slave of my desires. Who made you a king and queen? And then they quote Romans 8, 14 to 18. For all those who are led by, God, or are sons. For all those who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but have received a spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. And so it's the spirit of adoption. It's the righteous standing in Christ. It's the it's the baptism of the Spirit, the declared, justified position of sonship that you're given by grace, totally unfavored, love set upon kind of status that elevates you to kingship and queenship, to then, in love-fueled obedience, go and do what God has set forth for you to do. And so the kindly rule of God is not just to save us and then, just continue to do what you're doing. I have no real design and plan until you come be with me in paradise. Like we have this goal of, we'll all just, get along in the by and by. We're all just looking for heaven. But to a real degree, when Christ came to earth and set things all, and when He ascended, everything's now under His feet. We have a mission here that then is aimed heavenward too. So it's you gather it all up. So you know that old saying that you're so heavenly minded, you know earthly good, that you need to be not just aiming for heaven, but seeking to bring Christ's rule and authority down here. You know, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This kind of mentality that seeks for the good, and we talked about that earlier.
Is it Lewis that says aim for heaven and get earth thrown in?
Sure. Yeah. I think he was referencing just, not earthly pursuits, right?
Right.
So seek for the glory of God, and all things will be added to you. But I guess my point for saying that was it's all by grace, and it's love-fueled obedience. When you mentioned this is all by grace, this is all given to you to then go walk in, and you present your good, you present your work to the Lord, right? You see a man skillful in his work, he will not stand before obscure men, he will stand before kings. This is idea that God wants us to be excellent in our pursuits, that they're all driven and aimed at him, and who is our one audience, who is our one judge, who is our only authority. And there's that's why we can pursue things with a lot of zeal, missions and evangelism, church planting, and raising families that do all the same things and want to love and serve King Jesus, because we have we're fueled by the love that God gave us. I guess I'm rambling now, but what I'm trying to say is love-fueled obedience. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
You've been made a king and a king by the King, and that kind of love given to you should fuel your obedience.
Priest kings, baby.
But it makes me think of the parable of the talents, where Jesus says he gave to such and such 1 talent, such and such so many talents, and up and up and up. And then when he comes back, when the master comes back, whoever took their talents and then produced something with it, well, no, I guess he gave them all the same talent. So he all gave, and then someone produced another talent, someone produced so much more, and he's pleased with anybody who produced anything. But the wicked one is the one who took his talent and buried it and preserved it and didn't cultivate it.
Yeah, I think it was 5, 2, and 1, right? One guy had 5, one guy had 2, one guy had 1.
Right.
The guys with 5 and 2 went out. They doubled
That's right.
what they
That's
had,
right.
and the Lord said, "Well done, good faithful servant. Much has been given to you, and you've done
That's right.
much." And then the one guy, what have you done for me? And he's like, "Well, I just went and buried it because I didn't want to lose it." And he's like, "You wicked servant."
Yeah.
You were harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so strange. You don't expect that. It's kind of like, well, you gave me this car, and I parked it in the garage, and it's just as pristine as the day you gave it to me. I didn't even add a mile to the odometer to it. I mean, it's great. And then he gives it back, and it strikes us as shocking that the master says, "You're a wicked servant." But it's because he didn't take the talent he was given and attempt at all to cultivate it and to cause it to grow. And then it also shows us, I would put it in somewhat conjunction with Jesus looking at the widow at the temple. And you've got all these rich that are giving out of their abundance, but then you have this widow that gives the 2 mites. And Jesus says, and I want to take him at his word, she has given more than all those who gave out of their riches. I don't think Jesus is just saying, it meant more to her, so she gave more, but that in some way, because she gave the little that she had, it had a greater impact on the kingdom than the rich who gave all the, out of their abundance. So there's just thinking through this idea of taking dominion. I don't know why I keep coming back to this, but it's just heavy on my heart right now. How do we measure our dominion taking? Because I want to be careful that as we're talking about taking dominion, and we not measure our effectiveness for dominion taking based on our own eyes. We have to have kingdom scales whenever we're measuring. Well, am I actually taking dominion? Because if you don't have a lot, your dominion taking may look less impressive and less. It may look like it's moving the needle less than someone who's got a lot going on. But yet, if you're doing it for the sake of the Lord, in true service to Him, I think Jesus says you're giving more than those who are getting out of their abundance. and not doing it with the same heart.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it makes me think. I actually had a conversation with one of the ladies in our church this past weekend, and she was saying that she's been counseling a lot of young women who they have passive husbands, and they're not. If you just looked at them from the outside, they wouldn't seem like they're passive guys. But I think, kind of going along with what you just said, Nathan, there are guys out there, and maybe this is you, and so if this is you, listen up. There are men out there who say yes to all the things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you say yes to all the things that you're taking dominion over what the Lord has given you, that you're stewarding your time well. So if you're a husband and a father, and you're saying yes to all the service projects at church, but you're neglecting your wife and your children, I would argue that's not stewarding what the Lord has given you, and you're not taking dominion over those things. And so you're being active, but you're being passive at home. And so your wife is she feels alone and empty because you're busy filling up, cutting the grass at someone's house, and those are good things. But the Lord has given you unique responsibility as a husband, as a father, to shepherd and have dominion well, and again to promote flourishing in your home. And so you being gone all the time by helping a brother with the plumbing at his house, and then the next weekend you're helping him cut trees down, and then the next weekend you're helping him change the struts on his truck, and then all those things, you're like, well, I'm doing all these good things, but at home you have a starving wife who needs her husband. You have kids who want their father, and so misguided ambition can actually be counterproductive to you having dominion over your household. So it's just, and it's something that I've had to take a step back from and just say, I'm not going to say yes to all things. I need to be home. I want to be home, and I can let a college guy go cut someone's grass, or I can call somebody else up and they can go and handle that, so that I can be at home and be with my wife, be with my kids.
Well, you think about in history, the empires, the kingdoms, who extended their boundaries too far.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could convince yourself pretty easily, I need to do more because I need to be taking more dominion, and yet you don't have dominion at the place that your boundaries already exist.
Yeah.
So if you say yes to something outside of the boundaries, at the neglect of something within your boundaries, then you're not taking dominion. You're actually losing ground by trying to take more than you can handle.
Yep.
So it's a misuse of what the Lord's giving you. So I think one of the ways we have to be able to be in control of ourselves is not let the gaze of others and their judgment of our activity be the gauge by which we measure our dominion
Yeah,
taking.
agreed.
Right.
Yep.
So there is you have godly brothers in your life that can look into your life and say, hey brother, I think you're being lazy. I think you need to step up. But there's going to be times where you're going to be surrounded by guys that feel way more high capacity than you, and you feel like you need to meet their standard.
Mm-hmm.
But to be driven by your perception of them and their perception of you is not to have, as you said, not to have control of yourself.
Yeah.
They've actually got control of you instead of yourself. Something that I tell my boys quite a bit is either you will have control of yourself or something else will.
Yeah.
Something will control you.
Yeah.
It's not, as I think Doug Wilson says all the time, it's not whether but which.
Mm-hmm.
So which thing is going to have control of you? Are you going to have control of yourself, or is something else or someone else going to have control of you? Because I want my boys to know, you're walking into a world that's going to compete to have control over you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to have self-control in order to walk in that kind of world.
I mean, this is what Paul says in Romans. We're either going to be slaves to sin or slaves to righteousness. You cannot serve two masters. That's what the Lord says in Luke 16. You can't serve two masters, but the idea there is you will serve a master.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
you will be a man under authority. Even the son did nothing unless the father told him. He was walking in submission to his father. And when he met the centurion of great faith, he says, I'm a man too, under authority. And so I have my under authorities, and I'm trying to use those wisely. He said, and he submitted to the Lord. He says, so it's about, and that's a measure of faith. So to entrust yourself to the Lord and to say, I'm going to submit myself to Christ. I'm going to let Christ rule in me. I'm going to put on Christ. I'm going to die to my flesh. I'm going to have self-control in turn, by the Spirit, is to be someone who submits to authority and then can rule well as an authority, as someone who's been given much. Like, if you're faithful with the little,
Yeah, you'll be made a master.
you'll be made, you'll be given much. You'll be given more. And so, man, if we can give anything to our young men and to our young boys and my boys, it's that vision of being under authority. So they have to see authority as a good thing in their life, as a blessing in their life. First with me, like my burden for my kids is that they don't just obey me, but they obey me and they see it as a really good thing that they do. Right? That they just, and that's a hard switch to flip in their brain because we're naturally butting against authority.
Sinful in it.
And we're just, and I see it in my kids, they're rearing up. But when I'm calm and when I take good dominion over that situation and I extend my rule in a loving and kind way, but not budging, not like bending, where it's like, well, here's the standard, because it's not my own standard, this is God's standard. But do you see that standard as loving? God's rules and God's standards are not there to press on us and keep us down, but to elevate us and to give us, more of Him, more of Himself, more of His delight, more of His character, more of His joy. So if I can extend that to my kids, and they get a vision for what God is like through me, they will be well off, because they'll then grow up and see God's authority in the Bible over them as a good thing and something to be obeyed, because it leads to blessing, it leads to flourishing, it leads to sin not having dominion over them because they've been now united with the Lord. It's just so rich, and that's my burden right now, especially as I'm parenting the younger years. 9 and under are my kids, right? So they're getting to those ages where they're starting to see, is Dad's authority, and my 3 and 4-year-old are really starting to, 3-year-old mostly, trying to rub against authority and find that, is this actually the way I want to go? And instead of just meeting them with an iron fist every time, yes, there's a hard and fast standard, but it's always propelling them to see that, see beyond it. See, well, don't you see that I need you to see my authority over you as actually a really good thing, and I want you to receive it as a blessing.
Yeah.
Just painting that vision.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I'm just thinking of, because you said it several times, like, don't be harsh. You don't want to, come in with an iron fist. Like, it is, Ephesians talks about, the first half of Ephesians is just gospel. So how do we do all this stuff? It's fueled by the power of the gospel. So for those that are in Christ, you have this responsibility to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called. Paul urges Christians, and then he lists the rest of Ephesians is just a list of the ways that we do that. And so one of those ways, obviously, in 5, talking about walking in love, specifically wives and husbands, how you interact with one another and what it displays. It displays this mystery of the gospel of Christ loving His church. And then in 6, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your anger to children, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And so just your children will flourish. Those under your care will flourish when you yourself are seeking the Lord. Like you said earlier, thinking of Psalm 1. Blessed is the man who doesn't walk with these fools, these scoffers, but he hangs out with good people. That's not what it says. He delights in the law of the Lord. And so good manly dominion is first and foremost rooted in the gospel, rooted in the law of the Lord. That will lead to good discipline, that will lead to loving one another well and exhorting one another well. So,
Yeah. Something that comes to my mind, as you thinking about wanting your kids to submit to, your authority. And I think that stems from when you've taken dominion well, it should result in the flourishing of those that are under your care. So not to conflate dominion with just sheer power or authority. So what comes to my mind is in 1 Samuel, you have this account where David, Saul's jealous of David, is trying to kill Saul. Saul is trying to kill David. David's on the run. He goes to the tabernacle, and he's talking with these priests, and he needs sustenance for him and his people. And the priests there give him the showbread and sustain him, and so they leave. Well, Saul hears word of this from Doeg the Edomite. Doeg brings word back to Saul. Saul's jealous, so Saul comes to the tabernacle and he kills all of the priests. So he has all the power and authority, but because it's self-centered, it's self-serving, he ends up oppressing and killing the people under his care. Well, I think it's so interesting because at the end of that chapter, the priest's son, Abiathar, escapes and he finds David. And he says, David, I just wanted you to, like David, they've killed my dad, they've killed all the priests, and Abiathar's the only one left. And David's just distraught. He's like, he takes responsibility. He's like, yeah, I'm responsible for this. I knew Doeg was there. I knew he would take word back to Saul. And then he ends the chapter and he says to Abiathar, stay with me and you will be in safekeeping. So there's their idea that, our dominion, one of the ways to measure if we're taking dominion well, are those that we're influencing flocking to us to find safekeeping? Like, are we preserving them from bad authority, bad power, bad dominion? Because there's something that has dominion everywhere in every space. So one of the ways to compare, are we doing this well, is to consider, are the people or the responsibilities or the things under us flourishing? Are they protected? Just in trying to think through that. So I'm trying to think through practically what that looks like in different facets of life. Because I want to be able to gauge that. I want to be able to measure that. Not just am I doing a lot of things, but are the things that I'm doing actually accomplishing something? So, if you're taking dominion because you've got a garden in your backyard, are you
work and keep it, baby.
Are you? I don't, but you guys do.
You should.
Is your garden growing? Are you spending time on it well, such that it is growing? Or is your marriage starting to flourish because you're investing in your marriage and you're not just showing up after work and vegging out? Are your kids growing and developing? Are you keeping kind of a warm, authoritarian spirit in your home so that your kids want to come and tackle you at the end of the day?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just trying to think through what are the areas of your life you've called to take dominion over, and are those people under your dominion actually growing and flourishing because of the activity that you're taking on? And understanding that there may be seasons of life where you're preparing for that, and so it's hard to gauge, but starting to put those categories in your brain so that you're ready for them when the time comes.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have an answer to what you're saying, but I think Psalm 128 kind of gives us a picture of what that looks like. So Psalm 128, blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. You shall eat the fruit of the labor of your hands. You shall be blessed, and it shall be well with you. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. So you just think, talking about measuring dominion and those flourishing around you, this psalm just lays it out, right? You're walking in the ways of the Lord, and what happens? You necessarily, oh, I see where you're at. You necessarily have this fruitfulness around you,
Yes.
right? And then something just popped in my head while Nathan was talking that Stephen and I have just discussed recently is just Psalm 127 right before it. So 127 verse 3, behold, children are heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. So something we've just talked about is it's great to have arrows in your quiver, but if you've got a bunch of dull arrows, it ain't going to do you much good, right? And so, for us, just personally speaking, we have 5 kids, and so I think we agree that our wives are at this capacity to where if we were to add another arrow into our quiver, it would the other arrows would become less sharp. We would have less time to be able to pour into them physically, mentally, spiritually, all the things, so they would be sharpened. And so just as Nathan was talking about, what does that look like so that the people around you are flourishing? You're having good, godly dominion. Just thinking about my kids, I don't want to have dull arrows that go out into the world, when they're not in my care anymore. I want to have sharp arrows that cut, so.
Sure. Doug Wilson's book, Why Children Matter, the front cover is worth the price of the book alone.
Bro. Yeah.
So it has the mom and dad trying to launch the kid as an arrow. And it's a cartoon, pictorial, but it's really hilarious.
Yeah.
I just love it.
It's
I
a
love
good book,
looking
too.
at it.
It's a good book.
It's a great
Short,
book.
less than 100 pages.
It's really good.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, brothers, it might be about time.
And we can wrap it up.
Be kind to our listeners.
Yeah, sorry, it's been a minute. I think the last episode we had released back in
It was,
December.
yeah, it was last year.
Yeah, it was last year. Yeah, last year. So we'll end because it's been a while. What are you reading? What are you listening
Well,
to?
I don't feel bad for not, because part of this is this is pretty low on the totem pole. So taking dominion in other spaces.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. That's
So
true.
if you're listening to this podcast and you need to be doing something else, stop listening to us and take dominion.
Yeah.
You
Go be with your wife and kids.
know what you need to cut off, and
That's
know
right.
what you need to be focused on, and
Yeah.
just generally speaking, this last thing that I'll say. I had a conversation with a dear brother of mine, who I would say has demonstrated himself as one of the most high capacity men I've ever met in my entire life. And no, it's not either of the two brothers sitting next to me, although they themselves are high capacity individuals. But this brother in particular, he's a pastor, and probably one of the most high capacity. Felt like he didn't have any limit to his capabilities. And we were talking the other day, and he said, I mentioned that to him. I said, you strike me as one of the most high capacity individuals. And he was talking about having to take a step back. And he said, you know what? I don't think I was ever really that high capacity. I think I have been for a long time doing way too much to the detriment of those around me. And so, again, this is where I go back to part of taking dominion is maybe doing less than you think you ought to be doing, and really focusing on a few things as opposed to doing a ton of things. So limit your scope, prioritize the right things, home, church, work, and once you start getting outside of those circles, there needs to be a high bar for you to say yes to things.
Yep.
So prioritize the right things. Don't assume you are the most high capacity individual in the world. Focus on less than you probably think you ought to be, and trust the Lord with the rest.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Yeah. Have a good helper. The Lord looked upon Adam before sin and said, "You need a helper." So if you're a single man who's going, I think the Lord has called me to be single, he hasn't. The Lord saw that it was a bad thing for Adam to be in the garden alone. He needed a helper. So if you're not that high capacity and you realize that about yourself, find a woman, get married. Ask
She'll
her
double
out.
your capacity.
She'll
Two or
double
better
your
one.
capacity.
When two are in the field, one
Yeah.
gets a good return
That's
for his
right.
labor, two get more.
That's right.
All right, I'm going to end with this because it's one of my favorite passages of scripture for dudes. So 1 Kings 2, David is about to die. He's talking to Solomon, and he says, 2:1, when David's time to die drew near, he commanded Solomon his son, saying, I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong, show yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do, and wherever you turn, that the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me. So wherever you're at, show yourself a man, keep charge of the Lord your God, walk in his ways, and you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you may turn.
Amen. We're going to say, what are we reading? What are we listening
Oh, are we saying that? Dang, I felt that was a good end. But yeah, let's do that. Sure, why not?
Wow. Way to bring that to an unclimactic conclusion, Stephen.
Shoot. Well, let's do it again. Cut that part. I don't care.
We can edit it. We can do something. Yeah, what are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching?
My wife and I started The Rings of Power. Don't judge us.
I'm judging you a little bit.
And it's pretty good. It's entertaining. Maybe not. It's not maybe straight up the middle with Tolkien lore, and it's probably got some DEI stuff in there with, But I think it's fine. I think it's really entertaining.
It's clean.
Yeah, it's
there's
clean.
no cursing. There's no nudity.
That's
There's
good.
none of that
Not
stuff.
even Elvish cursing?
I don't think so.
They don't curse in Elvish?
I don't know.
I don't
I don't know. I don't know what that
understand
sounds like.
Elvish.
I'm a dwarvish guy myself, so I don't know about those elves over there.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, and we try not to watch a lot anyway, so that's kind of been the only show we've done together. We don't watch shows separate anymore. That's just been kind of like a habit. Like, let's not just go off on our own and like be in front of a TV.
Yeah.
Not healthy for either of our souls. So, been reading for fun, nightstand reading. It's been That Hideous Strength. I finished the first two I'm not going to call them space trilogies. The Ransom trilogy by Lewis. So that's been good. And then for school and teaching, jumping into Virgil's Aeneid right now. I'm going to be teaching that the next 3 weeks.
Nice.
And finished. We just finished the Screw Tape Letters, and so anyway, some rich reading on my shelf the last few days, but jumping into epic poetry and ancient Roman, and listening a lot to the Lord and to my wife.
Wow.
No.
Those are good things.
No, yeah, I don't know. I've been podcasting Al Mohler a lot lately, especially with political stuff going on. I just love his takes on just what's going on and synthesizing things really well, and I can catch up on what's happening in the world around me through his briefing. Yeah.
No, you, Nate.
Yeah, I've been trying to digest a lot on big picture of the Bible, and then also just reading some stuff on eschatology, getting ready for Mark 13, Mark's version of the Olivet Discourse. So just trying to understand and the views. And it's been super interesting because at the end of the day, my heartbeat is to want to help our people here at KVC see the big picture and understand the main things. So whenever it comes to these rather controversial passages, wanting to highlight the main things. So I've just been reading a lot there. And then just recently finished Dune on audiobook, and I cannot recommend it. So I feel like
Not enough. Can't recommend it.
I can't recommend it. I did not think it was good. Now it doesn't mean like be inappropriate if you listen to it. You need to be of a certain age to listen to it, but I didn't like it. Made me want to go back to Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So find characters of virtue.
Come on, somebody.
So yeah, that's where I'm at.
So watching The House of David on Amazon Prime, and if you're going, yeah, it's on Amazon Prime, I'm not going to watch that. Give it a chance. The first episode is actually laced with quotes from the Bible. It sticks very close to what is in 1 Samuel. N.D. Wilson, Doug Wilson's son, had a hand in writing the first 3 episodes. And so it's really good. You can watch it with probably kids older than like 8. There's some violence in there just because they're defeating the Amalekites. But other than that, really good. Super like softballs of talking about the Bible with your kids. So it's really good. Oh, we have a guest. And then
It's not the dog, is it?
no, it's not the dog. It's Logs.
It's my dog.
It's Steven's dog, his firstborn son. What am I listening to? So a lot of Forrest Frank, and the new City of Light album. Been listening to that a ton. And then reading, finished Pilgrim's Progress. been reading A Community of a New Covenant.
Have you read that before, Pilgrim's Progress?
Yeah.
This is your first time?
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I've read it before. It's probably my second time. I've read bits and pieces of it, but to read it straight through, second time read it through.
Okay.
If you haven't read Pilgrim's Progress, you need to go read Pilgrim's Progress. I know we say that about a lot of books, but seriously, like there's a reason it's the second most published book behind the Bible, and it's the second most translated book behind the Bible. Like, it's really good.
I thought it was purpose-driven life.
Shut up. Yeah, so finished Pilgrim's Progress and started, Community of a New Covenant by A.B. White. Been reading that for our Lawlords group, and it's just really good. Yeah, A.B. White. Yeah, that's what he is in my Bible. So anyway, Pilgrim's Progress. Go read it. It's good, and hopefully next time we record, I've started another book. So we'll see. I got my list.
Word.
Cool. All right, well, show yourself a man and follow the ways of the Lord, and we'll see you next time.
Oh.